1. Blog Talk Radio.
Contra Radio Network, Preparedness Radio, with your host, John Jeffers.
And good evening, John Jeffers here. Welcome to the Jeffers Brief. All right, tonight, I want to talk to you tonight a little about something that, well, maybe some of you don't have the knowledge or the inclination to do this, but it's important that you get this skill. And we're talking about defensive tactics. You're probably saying, what are defensive tactics? Let me try. You might know it by a different name. But before we get started, I must put this out. This is important. This is urgent. All right, now I got your attention with the EAS alert. Today, the CRN store, online store, is now open. It is stocked. Real easy. Either go to the group page or the like page on Facebook. You'll find a link to the Queensboro store that houses the Contra Radio Network items. Got a link there. Just scroll down maybe 2 or 3 stories and you'll see it. Click on the link. Merchandise. Got all kinds of stuff. And the beauty is, I don't have to stock any of it. You go to the store, you order what you want, they print it out for you, they make it for you, and they send it to you directly. And there's no minimums. Not yet. This is embroidered, not the iron-ons or silk screens or whatever you want to call it. These are embroidered items. Everything from, infant stuff, kid stuff, the horrible people known as teenagers that are in your life. Yes, they're horrible. Yes, teenagers are horrible from the age of about 12 to 24. They're horrible people. They are, trust me. If you haven't had them yet, you will. You'll understand it. If you do have them, oh yeah, you agree with me. In the meantime, we got stuff for men, women, duffel bags, backpacks. Also be embroidered the CRN logo. So please go there and feel free to spend liberally. This is a good thing when I ask you to buy things liberally because it helps support the show. So with that said, I mean, we've got hats too. You want hats? We got hats. You want the beanies? You got the beanies. You want, all kinds of stuff. So look it over, by all means. Eventually, probably next month, maybe, depending on how sales are, I will go into the silk screened T-shirts, that kind of thing. I don't know if they're even silk screened anymore, but those would require a minimum order, and I'll go ahead and foot the bill for that, provided I see stuff that's, if it's selling on the store, if it's selling, great. If it's not selling, I got, think about it again. But, all right, so tonight we're going to talk defensive tactics. If you want to call in to opine, quip, comment, laugh, criticize, I don't care. I can take it. Our number is 516-453-9389. Again, 516-453-9389. Do not use the 800 number because I've got to tell you something. Blog Talk Radio knocked that out well over a year ago. Maybe it's probably 2 years now. Why? Who knows? I don't know why they do what they do, but anyways, they did. All right, good enough. So, in the meantime, all right, we are live video on the Facebook group page. If you want to watch the video broadcast, you can do it live. And you can comment. I'd rather have you call in. It makes it more fun, more interesting when people call in, as opposed to just put it in the chat room. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean. So defensive tactics. what's the best way to put it? How about this? Hand-to-hand combat with empty hands, no weapons, just using your hands. You're probably asking, why do I need to know that? Well, unless you're going to be in the grid down situation and you intend to walk around with a gun or knife in your hand every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every month of every year, go right ahead. You can't do it. And it's ridiculous to even think you can. Of course, I'm being facetious. But what I want to tell you about is this. The reason we need to learn defensive tactics, and I don't care what, sometimes it's called martial arts. It's important that you have some kind of training, some kind of knowledge on how to defend yourself empty-handed. For example, how many of you carry a knife or intend to carry a knife? How many other people do you think are doing the same thing right now, and they also intend to carry a knife? How many of you have ever heard of the 21-foot rule when it comes to edged weapons? If you're not, that's okay. I'm going to explain it to you. It's real easy. The 21-foot rule says this. If you have an attacker that is within 21 feet of you, they can cover that 21-foot space long before you can ever draw your weapon and shoot them. You need to know how to defend yourself if you can't get to your weapon. I myself, there's a martial art that I really like. It's Aikido. I like that one. I intend to look up. I'd like to get into Krav Maga myself. If you're not familiar with Krav Maga, Kravmaga, that's the Israeli Defense Forces empty-handed weapons program. It's very effective. Women use it, men use it. It's easy to use. It's easy to remember. Some people like Taekwondo. My former pastor, she did Taekwondo for several years. My point is this. You need to pick something. You need to learn defensive tactics. You need to learn what to do if somebody has a gun on you and you are not going to be able to draw your weapon fast enough to kill. And my other question is this. What if you have somebody, how about this? Here's a scenario for you. What if you have a man just outside your secure area? He won't leave, and he has no weapons. He's frustrated. He's angry. He's hungry, thirsty, scared, frightened, fearful for his family, for himself, everything. What are you going to do? You got to pop the guy? Why? Wouldn't it be easier just to take him down with empty-handed? And here's another thing. Eventually, depending on how long the grid's going to be down, let's just say it's an apocalypse. Eventually, you're going to run out of finding bullets. You might be able to make some for a while, but eventually you run out of that material too. Wouldn't it make more sense to know and to have empty-handed techniques that you could use? Just an idea. I want to put it out there because I think it's important that we understand this. And you need to pick an art form, if you will. Pick an art form that you can, it's easy to learn, easy to remember, because when you're going through this stuff, it's easy to remember a lot of, techniques. But when you're under pressure, you got to be able to be able to remember it, to use it properly. That's why I like Aikido. And one of the reasons I like it, it's a purely, I shouldn't say it's mainly a defensive art. And it's based upon, everybody's created the same. Look at yourself, your wife, your kids. For example, here, in your forearm, you have an ulna and a radius. You have an arm, you have an ulna and a radius. We all do. Unless you're a robot, you don't have one. But if you're a human being, you've got it. You got elbows, you got shoulders. You can do a lot with just some minimal knowledge with that. And that's why I like Aikido. It was always easy to remember, always easy to use. If you had to escort somebody, it's easy to throw them into an arm lock because it's easy to remember. No one gets hurt. No one has to get hurt. The idea is if when you get into empty-handed defensive, is to strip the other guy of his weapon so you could get away. You can walk away. You follow me? Do I make sense? No callers. Okay, maybe I'm not making sense. I don't know. All right. Again, if you want to call in, you can. Obviously, you guys aren't interested in this. That's okay. I'm all right with it. Okay. Why else do we want to use empty-handed techniques? Because it's going to, first of all, when you're doing practicing and whatnot, you're going to lose weight. What is it? Yeah, baby.
You can say the call number again.
I have to say the call number. That was my queen coming in and saying I have to say the call number again. So the call number again is 516-453-9389. 516-453-9389. There you go. Thank you, dear. Don't you start. I'll put 516-453-9389. Good. Don't make me say it again. I will push you down those stairs. I know I won't. All right. It's my wife. All right. She doesn't usually come up and say too much during the show, but when she does, it's probably for a good reason, and it was. So anyways, what I was saying was you get to lose weight. You get to get exercise when you're practicing these martial arts. And that's a good thing. I mean, how many of us are truly prepper fit? I mean, I'm 54 years old. When I was working the streets, when I was with the sheriff's office, I was 50 years old, taking on guys 19, 20, 21 years old. I got to tell you, it got really rough sometimes. But having these techniques available means, guess what? I've got the upper hand. Now, that doesn't mean somebody else out there doesn't been practicing their martial arts and they don't know. But that's all right. That's okay. I posted something a while back. I think it was last week. Female at a shooting range. It was a competition timing. I don't know if you guys saw the video. But she was doing transitions from rifle to pistol. Very fast. Very fast. And if you listen to the video, you could hear the ding, 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 as she's hitting the steel plate reactive targets. What I said was this, and the lesson was and is and will always be, is that if you are not practicing, whether it's your firearms training, your defensive tactics, someone out there is. And if you should meet, guess who's going to win? Think about it. Look, guys, I know you don't want to do it, but it's necessary. Plus, it gives you confidence, too. Let's face it, as you get older, sometimes it's just plain tough to get motivated to do something. This could possibly be a way for you to, learn something to keep you in shape, to keep you prepper fit. Something that isn't going to look, you won't get killed practicing it. You won't. Now, that doesn't mean you find a martial arts class. Let's say you find a Taekwondo club and you join. Great. That doesn't mean that you go and then you come home and say, oh, hey, honey, come here, I want to show you something. And then you wrap her up in an arm, wrap her up. No. But it would be good for your wife to take the classes, your kids, if they're, take the classes. Most martial arts will deal with kids. They will teach kids. And let's face it, I don't know if you saw the viral video of the kid who's gotten bullied, the kid is absolutely destroyed. He obviously has not had any type of training or to deal with physical confrontation like he's dealing with those bullies. But that doesn't mean he can't learn. It's something for you. It's a necessary skill. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. They'll say, well, you know, I have my gun. I'll just pull and pop him. Really? You're going to pull your pistol and pop a guy? Why? First of all, you're going to run. That's a waste of ammunition if you don't have to do it. Ammunition is going to be like, you know, money, only better. If you don't think that I'm right, call me and tell me why I'm not right. Oh boy, I got all kinds of callers. We're going to get everybody in right here, right now. All right. Oh, my wife called in. Okay. Area code 281. Go ahead. Area code 281. Go ahead. Going once. Going twice. All right. Area code 281. Try again later. All right. 847-494. Go ahead.
Twice. Testing.
Oh, there you are.
Hey, hello?
All right. Area code 281. Try again later.
Hey, I
right.
actually got you. Had to hold for a little bit.
847-494. Go ahead. Twice. Testing. Oh, there you are.
Hey, yeah.
All right.
I've been on hold for a while.
Hold on.
Hey,
All right.
Hold on. Let's do it one at a time.
Hi, I just wanted to check to make...
Sorry, honey. I just muted you. Area code 281. Go ahead. 281. All right. He dropped out. Chuck, go ahead.
All right. He dropped out. Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a delay going on, so whatever I'm saying now, you'll probably get it like 10 seconds later.
Yeah,
He dropped out.
it sounds like it. All right. Area code
Chuck,
281.
go ahead.
Yeah, there's a delay going on, so whatever I'm saying now, you'll probably get it like 10 seconds later.
He dropped out.
All right.
All right. Eric.
We're going to put Chuck on hold. Area code 281. You're live. Go ahead.
All right, Eric. We're going to put Chuck on hold. Area code 281. You're live.
Area code 281. Come on. I know you're there.
All right, Eric. We're going to put Chuck on hold. Area code 281. You're live.
Well,
Area code 281. Come on. I know you're there.
all right, that one's gone. Back to Chuck. All right, Chuck, what do you want to say?
All right.
All right, Chuck, what do you want to say?
Well, this whole bullying thing, interesting topic. Yeah, there are lots of bullies out there. Not much you can do about that. I mean, you're either going to get clocked or you're going to clock someone else. It's pretty much the survival of the fittest or the biggest or the, the scariest. Do about that. I mean, you're either going to get clocked or you're going to clock someone else. If anything, it represents a very diverse environment, an uncertain environment where you're not exactly sure if you're going to be able to successfully convey your thoughts without getting your butt kicked, right? So in which case, yeah, you're going to need to defend yourself, or maybe the next best thing is to not be there and to know what the danger areas are so that you can avoid it. I mean, there are signs that are out there, and people need to be really keen on what those signs are so that they can make a quick judgment on whether or not they should move forward or move back or just make a turn and just go around the situation, you know what I'm saying?
All right. It's not about the bullying. That wasn't the point. The point is why you need to know, to have at least a basic knowledge of any type of martial art that you choose to use. I mean, the bullying thing is just that, if the kid had more confidence, maybe if he had some type of martial arts training, the bullies sit there and they get their clocks cleaned. They think twice about it. And they leave them alone. But don't forget, in today's school environment, what they want you to do is this. What they want you to do is this. They want you to be a pacifist. You can talk it out. And here, shake hands and be friends. No. How about if I bust his head and then he'll leave me alone and he'll never bother me again? That's the kind of outcome I like. That works. That does. That works for me. Area code 281 keeps calling in, and I keep calling him, but he doesn't answer.
Yeah, but okay. Area code 281 keeps calling in, and I keep calling him. Yeah. Here's what I wanted to say about that.
What?
Okay, I do agree with the overall. What's the word that I'm looking for?
Ass kicker.
I believe with the overall rules of engagement that if you are bullied by someone, yeah, you better be ready to inflict some serious superior force on that SOB so that they'll know in the future they won't mess with you again.
Right.
That's pretty much like combat 101, if you will. Now, on the other hand, if it's not one-on-one and he's got some guys on his side and you're like only one person, hey, okay, evasive maneuvers. Try to go around it or don't go for like direct engagement or conflict, because there's no winning scenario here. It's like Star Trek's Kobayashi Maru. You're a F-U-C-K with a capital F, right? Unless you have your own group, and then you're not even sure if they're going to be behind your back like his group is behind him. So you got to know the science. You got to know what you have at your disposal in terms of arsenal, and I'm not talking about bullets, but baseball bats possibly, mace possibly, but also who do you have that will back you up? And that's usually a very, very scary question to ask, because you don't know unless the chips are down who's going to be willing to back you up and who won't be.
All right.
That's when you figure out really quick who your friends are and who your friends are not. But the worst time to figure that out is when you're about to go face to face with freaking King Kong the bully. Off the mic.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Chuck disappeared on me. I'm not talking about... My point is, I was using it as an example. An example of what if this kid had the opportunity to get some education along those lines? What if he was taught, would the bullies... Look, when you're a kid and you're being bullied, it's because they know you're not going to fight back. And it takes a lot of courage for anybody to turn around and fight back, especially if you're outnumbered. But the good news is this, and this seems to work a lot. You take down the leader first. You take him out quick and first. You'll have one or two people that will decide they're going to follow along the leader. The rest of the bananas are going to scatter. So, again, my point is not that it's a bully situation. My point is you have to get some martial arts training in whatever art form you choose is right for you. I got asked Saturday night, hey man, I'm going to start working out and and I want you to show me how to do this, and this. And I'm thinking, look, the guy that asked me this, I saw him in a bar fight like 5-6 years ago. Golden Gloves boxer. He took out 2 guys at once just by boxing, because the other 2 guys were trying to go toe-to-toe with them. Way wrong answer. And they just stood there, and he just cleaned their clock. Meanwhile, I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, well, if he's jabbing Why aren't you backing up? No, I'm going to stand there and I'm going to stop his jabs with my face over and over and over again. I mean, it was ridiculous by the time it was over. My point is he had some kind of training. The boneheads that he was, fighting with, well, their training was, I'll stand here and I'll try to go toe-to-toe with him because I'm bigger and badder. Way wrong answer. Didn't work out well for him. I mean, it actually got to the point it was ridiculous. I mean, he'd just sit there and pound on one, and while the other one's still dazed, he'd turn on the second one, beat on him while he's dazed, go back to the first one, beat on it. It's like, anytime you want to stop this, it'd be nice. I think you made your point. And, it was just stupid watching them. And their tactics were absolutely freaking terrible. If I knew then that I'd be doing this show, I would have filmed it just because to use it as an example of what not to do. It was, it's just a point I was making. Okay, let's try to get area code 281 again. Go ahead, area code 281. Man, you've been calling. I'm trying to get you on here. Come on.
John, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you. I can hear you, bud. I got Terry waiting too. Oh.
Hello?
Go ahead, Terry.
Hello?
Go ahead, Terry.
Hello? I cannot hear anything.
You know what? There must be one hell of a...
I'm radio blind. I cannot hear you.
You must have one hell of a delay tonight. That's Blog Talk. It's not coming from here. And Terry's gone. All right. Well, I'd like to thank Blog Talk for taking my money and giving me a piece of garbage, but what am I going to do? All right. In the meantime, what do we got here? Let's talk about the Doomsday Diet. You heard me right, the Doomsday Diet. All right. I wonder why we have such a, it's got to be from their servers. It's not coming from me. Let's talk about the Doomsday Diet. Let's give you a little bit of background. It's by Garrett Graff. I think you guys will like this. Shortly after noon on December 1st, an ominous wail pierced the air throughout the Hawaiian Islands. The state's emergency management agency had flipped the switch on its attack warning tone, a foreboding siren that heralds an imminent nuclear attack. Not heard in decades, the tone will now ring out on the first business day of each month. One of a series of measures the state is undertaking to adjust to life in the shadow of North Korea's ongoing ballistic missile test and the bizarre gamesmanship between the Rocket Man and our own explosively tempered president who won't put up with this crap much longer. Wow, let me take a personal here. Is anybody else worried about the president's life? I've become, as we dig deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole of the deep state, I got to tell you, I'm starting to worry for his life. I really am. And I don't want anything happening to him. But if it does, well, we'll talk about that on another episode. But I want you to think about that. Well, let's get back to the story here. So meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Vladimir Putin sat down last month to practice the forgotten art of nuclear war, personally pushing the button to launch 3 ballistic missiles during a military drill, a step further than any U.S. president has ever gone in a nuclear exercise. Now, in response, the Swedish government has begun updating shelters untouched since the fall of the Soviet Union. As governments around the globe dust off moldering contingency plans for an atomic sunset, it's official. Nuclear Armageddon is hovering over the world once again. It's been decades since most Americans have thought seriously about nuclear war, although we're regularly entertained with reality TV shows about preppers readying themselves for it or a zombie invasion. What if, though, it turns out that they're the smart ones? if in the coming months or years a standoff with North Korea turns hot and we confront a nuclear holocaust. And millions of people flee toward long-forgotten fallout shelters. One of the first questions we'll face is the simplest. What do you eat when the world ends? It's actually a question that the government has spent a lot of time and millions of dollars struggling with. The answer, though, may not encourage you to survive. Now, the threat of nuclear annihilation didn't just hang over American society throughout the 1950s. It wholly reshaped it. In the early years of the Cold War, hundreds of thousands of volunteers manned church steeples, fire towers, and building rooftops and round-the-clock vigils to watch for approaching Soviet bombers. New York City distributed 2.5 million military-style dog tags to school children to help officials both identify bodies and reunite separated families after an attack. While schools in an Indiana county tattooed children's blood types under their armpits rather than on their arms, which would be blown off. While schools in an Indiana county. Yes. So to help, and which, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So they put them under their armpits rather than on their arms, which could be blown off to help speed transfusions in the event of injury. The expectation, which seems astonishing now, was that much of the nation's population would survive a catastrophic Soviet nuclear attack. Around the country, fallout shelters were constructed beneath backyards, in suburban basements, in the bowels of sturdy municipal buildings, each helpfully researched by FBI agents and engineers and then marked with yellow and black signs, many of which are still visible today. I make a personal note here. The yellow and black signs now say CRN, Contra Radio Network, Preparedness Radio. Yes. So they're faded and rusted in elementary schools and post offices. Government officials also turned to America's abundant natural wonders. As engineers hollowed out mountains to serve as secret emergency government bunkers and created small underground cities inside places like, Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado and Raven Rock Mountain in Pennsylvania, adventurous Boy Scouts were tasked with mapping abandoned mines and underground caves that could be used to protect civilians. Now, in Tennessee, the state's civil defense director estimated that about 800,000 of the state's 3.5 million residents could be housed in its extensive network of underground caverns, while in Hawaii, civil defense officials identified 28 lava tube caves for residents to retreat to in the event of an attack. As these efforts advanced, the Army Corps of Engineers ultimately identified 450 caves around the country that could house atomic refugees. Officials still struggle with the task of preparing the population for an entire country or the prospect of living underground. Government planners led several large-scale experiments to determine the optimum conditions and supplies, including one where California prison inmates received a day off their sentences for each day they lived in an underground shelter. Other experiments were a little more than publicity stunts, dreamed up by entrepreneurs who seized on public hysteria to market survival kits for basements and prefabricated shelters for backyards. Bomb Shelters Incorporated convinced Melvin Minison and his new bride Maria to spend their honeymoon in Miami 12 feet below ground in an 8-by-14-foot steel and concrete bunker. The pair emerged hot and dusty after 14 days, then promptly left for a real, company-paid 2-week honeymoon in Mexico. All told, during the peak of the fallout shelter craze from the mid-1950s to the late 1960s, the government tallied that some 7,000 volunteers had participated in over 22,000 man-days of shelter living and occupancy tests ranging from family size to over 1,000 people. Now, what did they learn? These experiments ultimately produced enduring national standards for underground shelters, such as a minimum of 10 square feet of space per person, which only half the space allotted inmates in crowded jail cells, was more than 3 times the amount of space given to prisoners at the Nazis' Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, and 6 times as much space per person as inside the notorious Black Hole of Calcutta. The government explained hopefully in one report on shelter life. Now, the test also zeroed in on answers to fundamental questions that had plagued doomsday planners for more than a decade. What's the minimum level of sustenance one needs to survive the apocalypse, and how do you get to that to some 50 million hungry survivors. Well, in 1955, Eisenhower's Federal Civil Defense Administration launched a propaganda campaign they called Grandma's Pantry, calling for each household to have ready a 7-day supply of food and water for an attack. Grandma's Pantry, the symbol of preparedness, unexpected company, Grandma always had plenty for everyone, explained one radio ad. In an emergency or during evacuation in case of enemy attack, it's too late to plan. You'll have to depend on your own resources on Grandma's Pantry. Women's magazines carried articles like "Take these steps now to save your family." Sears, Roebuck and Company erected government-produced Grandma's Pantry exhibits in 500 of its stores, encouraging people to stock up on Hawaiian Punch, Campbell's soup, Tang, boxes of cornflakes, and candy bars. Yet, as the 1950s unfolded, it became clear that buying a few extra cans of food at the grocery store wasn't going to feed the entire country sufficiently. In urban areas, high-rises, in many southern states where homes lacked basements, there would need to be a larger government-run shelters. People couldn't be expected to bring their own supplies of, and food. So everything they would need had to be ready and waiting inside a shelter when nuclear war arrived. The Eisenhower administration embarked on the quest to develop the perfect doomsday food. You got it. The requirements were stark. America's Armageddon ration needed to be nutritious, cheap, easy to eat, shelf-stable, and reproducible at mass scale. Taste, visual appeal, quality packaging, and all the other attributes that normally come with designing a successful, mass-produced consumer good would be discarded in favor of the simplest food the government could design. Now, that coldly logical approach, combined with an extensive 1958 study by the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, led the government toward a single commodity as the foundation for its plan to feed the nation. The parched wheat form known as bulgur, B-U-L-G-U-R, one of the simplest ingredients known to man. The main ingredient in dishes like tabola, kebab, and pilafs, bulgur is nutty, nutritious, high fiber, and supremely safe. Bulgur, not booger, bulgur, was selected for this investigation because it is processed from a basic agricultural commodity, whole grain wheat, which is plentiful in the U.S., low in cost, highly palatable, and reportedly very staple, one government report explained. The last thing stood out in particular because it would need to hold up for years inside fallout shelters awaiting the apocalypse. Man, this is a long article. So indeed, a long shelf life may be the most important criterion for choosing bulgur and a stockpiling program, the government reported. As part of its research, the USDA eventually landed on crackers as the best medium for bulgur wheat rations in a bunker scenario. After 52 months of storage, that's almost 5 years, by the way, it reported merely a discernible but inconsequential decrease in flavor. Does that sound like governmentese to you? It does to me. Discernible but inconsequential decrease in flavor. Oh, boy. Now, this is one of the oldest and most proven forms of food known to man. Paul Vischer, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Civil Defense, explained to Congress as he's presented a plan to mass produce the crackers. It has been the subsistence ration for many portions of the earth for thousands of years. Its shelf life has been established by being edible after 3,000 years in an Egyptian pyramid. After millions of dollars and years of research, it turned out that after a nuclear apocalypse, the remnants of the American civilization would survive by chowing down on whole wheat crackers. The government dubbed its creation the all-purpose survival cracker. I know. New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, perhaps the nation's leading civil defense enthusiast, bragged that a day's worth of crackers cost just 37 cents per person. An economic solution to feeding an entire nation following nuclear war. A new problem emerged, though. There wasn't enough capacity to turn the necessary 3 million bushels of bulgur wheat into the 150 million pounds of crackers that the government originally believed it needed at the time. Nearly all of the government's surplus bulgur went through a single plant at the Fisher Flour Mill in Seattle, and it couldn't possibly handle the volume the nation now required to secure itself against nuclear war. So on December 21st, 1961, the Pentagon convened the nation's cereal companies to best discuss ways to quickly ramp up manufacturing of the chosen biscuit recipe. Oh, I know. Now, additional suppliers must be found to quickly stock shelters, the Pentagon said. Within 5 months, it had more than $4 million in contracts ready with Long Island's Sunshine Biscuits, Ohio's Kroger Company, and Richmond's Southern Biscuit Company. Nabisco and the United Biscuit Company of America, which is now Keebler, also joined the effort, and in the end, industry met the challenge. The Bulgur survival crackers were manufactured in true mass quantities. Ultimately, more than 20 billion crackers were produced by the end of the program in 1964, and then sealed in airtight tins that varied in size depending on the manufacturer, often over 5 pounds and holding about 400 crackers. The tins were rushed across the nation to fallout shelters, caves, and mountain bunkers, where Americans might ride out the nuclear war. Now, plans called for shelters to stock 10,000 calories of food per person, which would have worked out to a little over 700 calories per person per day over the expected 2-week stay underground. Each government-run shelter was to be stocked with 21-inch tall fiberboard drums lined with plastic. That would start out as water storage, containing just 3.5 gallons of drinking water per person for the entire duration of the internment, and then once empty, be converted into toilets. Since there was little else to do in a shelter, the government literature encouraged serving the government literature encouraged serving 6 small single cracker meals each day of precisely 125 calories. The cracker diet would also include stockpiled tins of mouth-soluble carbohydrate supplements, for example, suckable yellow and red hard candy, as one official explained. Although this may seem somewhat austere, nutrition experts consider it adequate and in accord with minimal survival concept. That's a bureaucratic way of saying that the crackers would provide the equivalent of a doomsday starvation ration. Yes, you'd still be hungry, you'd still lose weight, but you wouldn't starve to death. Herman Cain, a Cold War strategist, glibly assessed, well, you're sipping a drink, munching on something tasteless, and it's dark and crowded. A Greenwich Village nightclub. So the government expected that survivors would be able to emerge from shelters to search for food and water after only a couple of weeks. The contamination of food and water, we think, is one of the lesser problems, not one of the major problems of the post-attack environment. Stuart Pittman, John F. Kennedy's civil defense head, told one military audience, if the radioactive particles got into the food, well, you could wash it out. It would be possible to harvest the crops in the field after a rain or two. Oh. I don't know how we survived. Based on research conducted around the sites of dozens of nuclear tests in the Nevada desert, planners estimated that few crops would be lost entirely in the first year after an attack, and that by the following year, most agriculture could return to normal. Of course, according to the government planners, the lingering gamma radiation would limit the amount of time that workers could safely till the fields, but according to the actuary tables, enough Americans would die in the nuclear attack that even short work days would suffice to feed the living. Oh yes, this is true, people. So officials in each region studied native food stores and agricultural supplies, then estimated the difference between a nuclear war in the springtime and one in the autumn. In the southeastern United States, for instance, officials estimated that if an attack occurred in the fall, agricultural harvesting would be 95% complete, and that survivors in states like Alabama or Georgia would then be able to forage a pound of food a day, catching fish or game or eating roots or berries. Nebraska, meanwhile, went one step further and tested out a fallout shelter for livestock. The Roberts Dairy Company built an underground bunker capable of holding 200 cows and ran a 2-week test with 35 cows and one lucky bull named Aristocrat. all overseen by 2 student cowhands. The cows appeared to barely notice they were living underground. Now, next door in Kansas, officials calculated they could provide 2 million pounds of food after an attack, and that if survivors reduced consumption to an austerity diet of 2,000 calories, the state's food stocks could last nearly 2 months. Now, besides the official stocks, Kansas wildlife could help too. Its forests, plains, and waters contained, officials believed, 11 million man-days of food, the amount of food needed to feed an adult for 1 day, in rabbit meat. Now, 10 million man-days of wild birds, 5 million man-days of edible fish, and nearly 20 million man-days of meat in residential pets. After an attack, officials also plan to confiscate household vitamins for the good of the general population and ration carefully the state's 28-day supply of coffee. Everything would be fine. I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking it too. Yes, the animals would be radiated as well. As it turned out, though, Rockefeller's enthusiasm notwithstanding, not even the federal government would stand behind its chosen cracker. February 1962, when the Navy set out to test how people would survive on fallout shelter rations, it hid 100 sailors for 2 weeks in a fallout shelter on the grounds of the Bethesda Naval Hospital outside of D.C., and refused to offer the sailors only survival crackers for sustenance, supplementing the meals with different types of soup, peanut butter, jellies, and coffee. Now, perhaps no one should have been survived, given the crackers' major flaws, was immediately apparent to the reporters who were offered samples. The wafers were about 2 inches square, a quarter-inch thick, and resembled small pieces of wallboard, wrote one reporter. They tasted like wheat and crumbled easily. The biscuits, the New York Times wrote, may be destined in the area of possible nuclear warfare for the notoriety that World War II gave to Spam, the crushed meat. No, they were not. That whether the crackers were preferable to starving seemed entirely debatable. Timothy J. Cooney, who ran civil defense for New York City, had an entirely different suggestion. At any rate, get into a building, whether it had a shelter sign or not on it, that had an A&P in it, he told the Times. So there you go. That's how bad it was. So the all-purpose survival cracker tins were tested for freshness annually by, of all government entities, the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps, and they appeared to hold up over the decade following their introduction. In the early 1970s, the crackers were still fresh enough that, as Cold War fears receded and fallout shelters seemed increasingly obsolete, international aid groups turned to the stockpiled tins to aid a natural disaster and famine relief around the world. Well, it's no wonder they hate us. We gave them freaking wheat crackers when they were starving. So, CARE International exported millions of biscuits to countries like Niger and Chad. They saved a lot of lives here, Jack Soldati, CARE's Niger director, said at the time. The government warmly embraced the idea of converting Cold War rations to disaster relief, believing they had discovered a great way to recycle and rotate the stores of crackers. 1974, officials estimated there were still 150,000 tons of crackers stocked in fallout shelters out of the nearly 165,000 tons that had originally been baked. So last week, we went up a can and ate some, explained D.C. Civil Defense Director, brushing aside concerns about their freshness. One Pentagon official, appearing to not understand the original purpose of the biscuits, reported that the rations dispatched for disaster victims weren't meant to be a complete diet on their own. You wouldn't want to eat them for a couple of weeks with nothing else, he said. They're good with a little bit of cheese on them, with a martini on the side. So later that year, the U.S. exhumed 20 tons of crackers, hidden in an old streetcar tunnel under DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., that had been used since the Cuban Missile Crisis to store civil defense supplies. And they shipped them where? To Bangladesh, to feed survivors of a monsoon there. Other cracker catches were dispatched to Guatemala to aid victims of the devastating 1976 earthquake. The recipients of the disaster food reported developing what one newspaper described as severe gastric disturbances after ingesting the biscuits. That's because human beings are more or less allergic to wheat. Why we still do it, I don't know, but we do. As those reports trickled back to the U.S., Officials across the country wondered just what they'd stocked away for a nuclear apocalypse. So in mid-1976, Erie Jones, the Illinois State Emergency Coordinator, convened a group in his shag-carpeted office in Springfield for a taste test. It didn't even start well. The mere smell from the newly opened tin caused coughing fits. He took a single bite, grimaced, then canceled the rest of the experiment. In reporting the taste test gone wrong, the Chicago Tribune declared that the survival biscuits would be better as weapons than food if a war did unfold. That fall, after hearing similar reports from around the country, the federal government recommended officials discontinue the use of the millions of stored biscuits. By 1978, the federal government's Civil Preparedness Office issued what amounted to a nationwide recall of any crackers that remained in shelter stockpiles. As a result of recent laboratory and other tests, a high probability exists that all the cereal-based rations stored have become rancid. It is recommended that cereal-based rations no longer be considered as shelter supplies and should be destroyed or disposed of. I bet you can find these things on eBay. I bet you could find them. And it was mostly a moot point. By the end of the 1970s, nearly all the nation's fallout shelters had long been forgotten. So what do you think? Good stuff, huh? Yummy. Can't imagine. All right. Well, I'm sorry for those of you that did call in. This one wasn't me. This one was, oh, come on, guys, giving me the angry look. Come on. It's not my fault. Oh, you guys are so bad to me. It's not my fault Blog Talk Radio has a 30-second delay on everything. No, you guys are all bad. You guys are bad to me. See those little angry emojis floating across the bottom of my screen. What is this? Fine. If you want to eat the crackers, go eat the crackers. I don't care. I warned you about them. Oh, my, oh, my. And it's the same person doing it. You guys are so, you are so bad to me. All right. In the meantime, well, how much time we got left anyways? I got a few minutes. Guys, look. I'm serious about this civil defense thing. And I'm sorry, I'm serious about the defensive tactics. You do need to learn something. You do need to learn just the bare basics. You don't have to become a master at it. But you should know some bare basic moves to protect yourself. I taught it to my daughter. And when she was... What grade was she in? Either 6th or 7th grade. And some of the boys were giving her a ration. So I showed her a couple things to do. And I said, remember, you can't do this until, you only use it to defend yourself. No, the first one that smarted off to her, she walked up to him and drilled him right away. I had to have a discussion with her about it. I mean, she knows what to do. She knows how to do it. And it's like, it does work. And I won't tell you what she did, but it's a devastating move, and it works on every human being on the planet. I will tell you that. But, yeah. And, yes, I got called into the school, and, yes, I had to have a chat with their pacifist principal, and I said she's not going to be anybody's victim. And if you and your staff can't be around, well, to protect her, and I said, I understand that you can't be everywhere at once, doesn't mean that my daughter gets to be a victim. Sorry, not happening. And so, with that, we agreed to disagree, and that was the end of it. But she does know it works. My point is this. If a 7th grader can do it, I am sure you can. That doesn't mean you can't go to classes and go and teach your family the same thing. But you need to know empty-handed techniques. Whether you're going to wrap them into a wrist lock or an arm lock or take them down to the ground to disarm them, search them down, you need to know that stuff. And no, watching it on TV doesn't work. You can't watch Jack Reacher and decide that you're now Keanu Reeves you are not going to do the John Wick thing. There is a video out there of Keanu Reeves practicing on the range. You might have seen it. He's doing weapons transitions, and he's very quick at it. He's very good. He practices. You need to practice as well. We should all practice. We should. That's just the way it is, guys. So, that's what I want to say about defensive tactics. Yes, I did want to talk about the doomsday diet, because I bet you if you go online, you go to eBay, I bet you will find those cracker tins out there. Because a few years back, they emptied out a lot of the shelters, the old civil defense shelters. Don't buy them. Don't buy those crackers. Don't buy those tins. Just let them ship them to the Middle East, to the Palestinians. They can sit there and they can gnaw on those. It's not like it's going to make them angry, or they're not going to get any angrier than they already are, so who cares? All right. Dawn's had a technical difficulty with BTR. We got that worked out, so she'll be on Friday. And let's see. Next week, Terry was watching a show, Brunswick. He highly recommends it. He highly recommends Brunswick. You can see it on YouTube, the full movie. So he highly recommends it. I haven't seen it yet, but he's there. Chuck, I'm sorry, buddy. We could not get into it too much today. Again, thanks for calling in. Who else? Area code 281, man. I think that was Tim. I'm not sure. Regardless, I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm sorry, guys. I couldn't get in there. Couldn't get you in because of the silly BTR. But like I said, we're moving ahead in different platforms, different ideas. The latest one is the CRN online store is now available. It's open. Please buy liberally. Shop. We got all kinds of items. If I could put the CRN logo on forks, knives, and spoons, I would. And I'd try to sell it. I would, but no, I haven't been able to find that yet. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop looking, though. I will keep looking. All right. With that said, thank you all for joining me tonight. I'm John Jeffers here at the Jeffers Brief. Thanking you for spending a little bit of time with me this evening. At least, once a week you come in. And we got some other things coming up. We haven't forgotten about the shows. Most of the shows we've talked about doing the last few episodes, we're talking about bringing them online probably after the first of the year. Let's get through the holidays first. And we got some other things planned also. But just keep you in the foil hat soldier. Glad you're here. I know we got Charles in Nebraska. I know he listens a lot, but he doesn't always call in for whatever reason. That's okay. Anyways, I want to thank you all, each and every one of you, for sharing your evening with me and allowing me to talk to you tonight. And we'll see what happens next week. If something really major pops up, I'll be online. I'll come here. Let's see, what else can we talk about? I don't know. That's about it. I don't see anything in the video chat room, but I know there's like 4 or 5 of you watching. I appreciate it. Thank you. This will be available in podcast.
90 seconds.
So with that said, I'm going to close it out tonight. I want to say thank you to my Prepper and Patriot friends. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Remember, I say to all of you this: be safe, be alert, and be vigilant. I'm John Jeffers here at the Jeffers Brief on Contra Radio Network, saying thank you for joining me tonight, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Thank you for using Blog